Welcome back to Finding the Edge podcast. I'm Garrett Boyum, joined with Robert Fry and Garrett Baker.
And today we're going to talk about a good concept called Goodharts Law, which more or less is basically trying to understand the fallacies of chasing a single metric.
And I think this is one of those topics very pertinent to baseball, especially now, where especially I've seen guys starting to really chase metrics over the game itself and how it actually plays within the game, especially on the pitching side. At least I've seen that a good bit, where somebody sells out for a very specific metric and never actually figures out how that metric may help them in the game, like how that may actually help you get outs. And I think that's where a lot of people could potentially get lost within this whole thing. They're valuable, but only when it actually brings you back to the game.
And so for me, I feel like this fits really well with an ecological approach, because to me, an ecological approach helps us stay focused on what is important. Like what is for the lack of a better term, specifying about like what it is that we're doing that's actually going to help us see the results or see what we do in practice transfer to the field. And so that's why today I wanted to go through this tweet that I put out a long time ago on Goodharts Law. I do want to say for listeners of the podcast, you are going to definitely be hearing more of Baker. Baker's one of our new co-hosts who is going to be in the rotation. So today's episode is a two-parter. While we were recording the intro, we started riffing on our thoughts on the topic and kind of gave an updated version of our thoughts on Goodharts Law and how we're currently using and applying it. Additionally, this episode, there's a few visuals. We're talking about a few different Twitter posts, and there's some images with it, and there's a little bit of video as well. So if you would like to better follow along with what we're talking about and discussing, because I kind of forgot that this is mostly an audio podcast, so I didn't describe the pictures quite as well as I should have. So if you want to be able to follow along with us, head on over to Spotify or YouTube. And otherwise, without further ado, enjoy today's podcast.
Also, if you enjoy our content and would like to learn more about ecological dynamics, one of our favorite topics here on Finding the Edge, we encourage you to check out the work by Emergence. We got a great deal going on with them right now to get 7% off if you use the code EDGE7. They got a wide range of courses ranging from an extensive mentorship for those who really want to dive deep and get something a little bit more customized and unique to them. Unfortunately, the code doesn't work for that, but if you're looking for a great alternative, we recommend you check out the Movement Academy Intro. The Movement Academy Intro is a college-style course facilitated by the team members at Emergence. But if you're looking for something a little less intense, but yet more of a broad overview of these ideas and concepts, check out EcoD for Dummies. If you want something that that gives you an overview, but as well as practical examples, check out the Practitioners Bundle, and you get 3 mini courses on the warm-up and how these ideas apply within the weight room and to speed and agility. So if you're looking for an edge in your coaching, check out the content by Emergence. Make sure to follow Emergence at Emergent Movement. Movement is abbreviated MVMT. That'll be their handle for all their social media. It's also used for their website, emergentmovement.com. You can find all their links to their social media and their website in the description below.
Let's begin. Analyzing. Finding the edge.
To flip back to what we were talking about, though, about Goodharts Law, what was it that you were talking about even more recently in terms of chasing metrics? I know we were talking about it earlier. I mean, because I know for myself, and this is what we get into in the episode, was just talking about bat speed. Like bat speed is a metric that I think a lot of coaches chase. And I just, I haven't seen necessarily a huge correlation, at least in some of the little bits of data that I've collected. And so to me, it's like, well, what is the most important thing? And to me, it's like the ability to put the ball where you want on the field. That's really what matters. And so, I mean, the other thing too, and I think this is something that I've been saying to more of my players, is like, let the ball be your feedback. instead of looking at, okay, what's this metric? Like the ball is going to tell you, did you hit it well or did you not? And so I think, can't remember if we talked about it in this episode or not, but the whole idea of like the world is its own best model. Instead of trying to go off of these models of, this is the ideal bat speed. And not saying that like these things aren't necessarily good, but if it doesn't transfer, like making sure what you're doing transfers, if you're going to spend all this time on it, then you don't see it show up on the field, then to me that in terms of on-field performance, then to me, I think we wasted a lot of the players' valuable time.
No, you're absolutely right. Because then if you want to chase a single metric like bat speed, now internally that person maybe think, oh, I just got to swing as fast as possible. What holes does that create? It doesn't just create possibly more swing and miss. It could create just very incorrect imbalances within the swing itself. And like you said, like having the world kind of be your view, or the field, the ball, whatever. It creates that kind of that dichotomy where it's not exactly what you want. If it's like, oh, I swung the bat fast, oh, I'm good.
Yeah, or in terms of it'll affect your batted ball outcomes. Sorry, what were you going to say, Baker?
No, I was just going to say, I think this all kind of comes back to the idea of like your action capabilities, or like what you can actually do versus like it actually being a skill. And I've talked to this with our guys about certain pitches. Like we could get a really good metric for a specific pitch, but it's the difference between like having a quote unquote nasty pitch and an actual skillful pitch, and a pitch that's going to play within context and actually produce an out versus just like one thing that maybe moves a lot more. Yeah, now it's moving a ton more, which may potentially help us get a lot more outs. But it only matters when it's in context and we're actually skillful with that pitch. Because like I've seen people get a really good metric with a pitch and never be able to utilize it in a skillful way within a game context. And I think understanding what pitches necessarily need to become a little better, which ones don't, all rely on the game, not based on what output you may see on like Rapsodo or Trackman. I think it's a decent place to look when you don't have the game. And it's a good place when a pitch isn't potentially working to look to like, okay, if I get this in this direction, it may potentially happen in the game, but it needs to work back all the way to that. Like getting outs within a game so I can prevent runs, which I know we go into the episode a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think to kind of build off of this, like even where we are right now in our off-season phase, like I think this actually came up in one of Rob Gray's recent episodes in terms of like specificity, like how specific your game like does it need to be. And I think there are times where you can just build or try to build a little bit of like capabilities, is it action capabilities, or was it that Baker, we were talking about this, but no, but what Stu was saying, there's the difference between,
well, he talks skill and ability, right?
Skill and ability, right? Yeah. So like just the ability to express raw power. Like I think there's time to do that. And so right now, like we're hitting off a machine that's just basically all fastballs, but it's such that guys can actually hit it and then learn how to generate a ton of force into a baseball using a bat. And so, that's how well that transfers will depend upon once you put somebody in there who's actually trying to get them out throwing different pitches. That'll be kind of the test as to whether or not this transfers. But increasing their ability to like contact the ball with more force, sometimes you actually have to simplify the task more so that they're able to actually focus on that thing. And so that's where, to me, it's there's a time and place, right? Like you were talking about for working on like the metrics or whatever. In order for you to be able to, for example, throw some sort of other pitch, you may need to do it in a stripped down context where you're just exploring with the ball and you're just seeing what type of movement can you put on that ball. And then eventually you do need to go out and test it against a resisting opponent or an actual batter who's trying to hit that ball, and then see how do batters react to that pitch. Like so I think it just kind of depends where you are. Like I think back to like pitchers, playing catch, it was that place where you'd mess around and just see how you could get the ball to move. before you had cameras. And now I think the cameras help guys who had less feel and less ability to kind of explore, give them more feedback as to far as how are they interacting with that ball. And so, I mean, I've seen it at least with our guys, with what our pitching coach is doing, like having that visual information and using Rapsodo to help guys understand how they're interacting with the ball, then helps them. Like you can just take it to the next level of exploration in terms of like, okay, if I start messing with this and with this feel, like how am I now interacting with that ball? And then you actually can see how you're actually now interacting with it and being like, well, why isn't this moving the way that I want it to? And then actually seeing like, oh, I'm not actually getting my fingers or my hand to that spot. So I feel like that's important to throw out there. You know, I don't know what your thoughts are, Baker, on that, as far as having a lot of the game-like information or constraints pulled out of the training environment. But that to me is where I'm kind of curious your thoughts, because we've very much gone on that. Oh, we want to have all these game-like constraints or information sources present in the practice environment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also depends on different timescales, like where we're at in the season too. Because like there's like right now we're not gonna have hitters. So like if we're gonna look somewhere, one, like we have a general idea of what metrics may potentially help you get out. And like that's gonna be in a stripped down setting, because one, like if you're gonna go explore in some ways, I think you can still be fairly representative and explore, but in certain times, especially like pitchers, like they're not overly comfortable just like ripping out a new grip with the dude standing down there like in the batter's box, right? So like taking that out may allow them and free them up to now go explore in different ways. And I think it's actually a really cool concept, is using that kind of data and exploring with that to learn how to manipulate the ball and like see, okay, if I do this happens. Like this is now I get this much movement this way or that much movement that way. Or even you can take it, and I know I've played with this concept, like having guys explore all different ways to move the ball. Like, all right, I'm going to try to make it have more vertical depth now. All right, now I'm going to try to make more horizontal on this one. And like now you're becoming a master manipulator of the ball. It may not be your ideal pitch based on your arsenal, but like it's hard to not have pitches when you know how to do everything to the baseball. And I think that's almost like a little Yu Darvish in a way. Because Yu Darvish like has a litany of pitches, and I think he just explores and creates and almost has like different variations of his stuff. And I think he can match that to the context a little bit, which is kind of a cool way to kind of think about pitching too. But yeah, I think it is important to take himself out of context at times to explore and potentially find something else you could use within. Again, like you have to keep it in the idea of like we want to use this in a game context. That's what we're going towards, not just a metric. Like we're still trying to get out. And I think keeping that in mind is really important, but you can take it out of context if you keep that in mind, that the whole point is to bring it back into context, and that's it.
Yeah, and the way that I was kind of thinking about this is that, at least especially for pitchers, the way they kind of want to approach this is kind of the same way that a comedian approaches like their craft. Like you develop all these different sort of jokes or pitches, and then when you go out and then like you get some sort of hitters or some hitters to stand in, and you now start utilizing those and seeing which ones land, which ones actually are deceptive, which ones do they hit well, which types of guys hit these balls well, you know, and which ones does this pitch perform well against. Like it, and so to me, it's just like a comic will go out early and just like tell a whole bunch of different jokes and then see which ones land with the crowd, and then those are the ones he runs with. And so to me, that's how pitchers should approach the kind of their development of like, okay, when you get into this part of the off season, which most guys are now getting into, of November, December, January, and they're very in the kind of the early stages of the off season, or starting to get ramped back up. Now start playing with a bunch of different pitches and doing pitch design and see how many different pitches you can come up with. And then once you have a bunch of different pitches, you go use them against batters, and then start paring down and finding out which ones actually are ones that you can use effectively to get hitters out or to make hitters miss or get weak contact.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's times where you can even, like I've seen this utilized a lot, I don't know if it's always utilized in the right way, and I think this is where it gets dangerous. But you can have potentially like knowing there's a specific metric that you like we know has worked for certain pitchers. Like if you get this to happen, like you're probably going to have some success. But it's still probably, and we still need to see that within context. And like as long as the focus is not like the end goal is just a metric, like that is a capability that may potentially take us to be able to get outs a little easier if my slider does this or my slider gets this kind of spin and this kind of movement, right? So that's the thing where I think a lot of people will chase that. But if that's all you chase and you're trying to force yourself down it, if you can't possibly do it and you can't find a way to do it, like constantly trying to go after it and like changing yourself to do it, like it may not be the best for you. It may not be the best authentic version of yourself if you're just cramming yourself into a metric, I guess. Because I've seen guys just go all out for a metric and then like actually create a worse version of themselves because like they just thought this metric would work better with their arsenal. It didn't necessarily work. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And finding just like, hey, what's my best way to get outs? What's a potential way for me to open up my arsenal and then bring it into the game context and find that out? And I think we need to, and I think I've seen a trend slightly in this direction, but we need to test that earlier on in the off season, like for sure. And I think that's one thing I've been encouraged by looking at. There's a lot more live at bats going on and stuff like that, but like as long as we're doing that, I think you'll be in a decent shape when you're thinking decontextualized work. As long as we're like our goal is to get there into the context as quick as we can.
Robert, what do you got? Any thoughts on this so far, and how we can utilize? How can we better utilize metrics for player development and harness the analytics that is now becoming much more prevalent within the game of baseball? I mean, especially at the pro level, but I think it's also trickling. Like the findings at the pro level are trickling down to, at least to college, if not high school.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is there just needs to be a level of education to these kids. Because again, if you're chasing one metric, there's a lot of downsides. Oh, I want my wheeler to have this. Or, like if someone goes to a certain event and they find out that their spin rate is 3,000 RPMs. What does that mean? Oh, I have a great breaking ball. I'm going to start throwing. Well, just because you have 3,000 RPMs doesn't mean you have a great breaking ball, and that's why I want to bring up like spin rate, because a couple of years ago at the MLB level, like we were like, that's the next big thing, having a high spin rate. But it turns out that there isn't that relationship from spin to movement. It can aid movement, but then once they remove the sticky stuff, it's like it doesn't necessarily make that huge of a difference. So I think the biggest thing is just education, being willing to challenge kind of the theories, being willing to challenge your own theories. There has to be times where it's like, okay, I believe in this, but what if we viewed it this way? So like, I'm a proponent of bat speed. Well, what if we look at bat speed and compare it to bat to ball skills? Or what if we look at bat speed and compare it to swing decisions, things like that?
Do has anybody actually done that? Looking at bat speed relative to bat to ball skills? I mean, because that is literally the argument that most people make for why more bat speed. If you have more bat speed, you have more time to see the ball. And if you have more time to see the ball, then you can hit it. You'll have better chance of hitting it. And I mean, in theory, that kind of makes sense, but I also see it as if you got better bat speed, you may just swing through the zone faster. And so your ability to adjust to the ball, you're just going to be on and off the ball faster. Like, I don't know, that to me seems to be like one of the possible solutions as well. Like, is that having that definitely improves the action capabilities of the person, or it's kind of like degrees of freedom. Baker, you're more in this world than I am right now, in terms of all the terminology. So you have action capabilities, and then you have your degrees of freedom that are based upon You know what I mean? Like, so like now that you have basically another degree of freedom here, like you have more to work with. I think I'm talking about action capabilities, right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, swinging faster.
You have more tools basically in your tool belt to like work with.
Yeah, and I think
broader range.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the idea, if I swing faster, then I can technically wait longer, supposedly, to pick up more information, and there may be more affordances in the environment for me to act upon because I could wait later. Well, that's true or not, I don't necessarily think. I mean, it very simply it seems right. I can wait longer, so I can see the ball more. I'm less susceptible to like seeing break to not seeing break, or like not like tunneling fooling me, or like I know that's what Rob Gray was talking about in one of his recent podcasts. But yeah, I don't know if there's been studies that actually prove that, or it's just like simple thinking, because it makes sense. Like if I can swing faster, I can technically wait longer, so I can get more information, which may open up other possibilities I would not have seen to act upon if I had the swing sooner.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then there's that side of it too, because I know in my time at Quincy, I never kind of put this to fruition, but something I observed. This is just an observation, and again, take this with what you will. But whenever I would see bat speeds go up, typically the on-plane efficiency using blast data would go down. Mm-hmm. And so let's say, whenever players' average bat speed was around 65 miles an hour, with blast, his on-plane efficiency was 70%. Is good way to look at it if your bat is on-plane 70% through the swing. But when they would go up to, say, 70 miles an hour, they typically drop to like 65 or 60. Again, it was just an observation. The problem was like we couldn't use blast in the game, and so you don't really know the exact number.
We need to ask some of those teams that have been like, because I've seen some D1 teams with guys up to bat with blast sensors on, and so I think it'd be interesting to see what those numbers are. I mean, in the same way, it'd be interesting to see if there's any correlation between increased bat speed and contactability. I mean, you would have to get the right sample or sample population to get some good numbers, but that you could actually draw some good conclusions from. Because obviously, if you're comparing like guys that are throwing 74, hitting off of guys throwing 74 is not the same as talking about guys trying to hit off guys throwing 85 or even 90 plus. So it's much a different thing.
Well, yeah, and like the side of it too is like, to your point, like when you have differences in velo, like sometimes players will, with a slower pitcher, will like gear up and be like, "Oh, I'm going to hit this as far as I can and swing as hard as I can." Usually, what happens when they swing as hard as they can, everything goes out the window. Like their bat's not on plane, and if it got in that exact teeny tiny spot, they would make contact, but they didn't because they're just focused about swinging as hard as they can.
Well, I mean, I wonder how much that changes your ability to connect with the information.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I think, yes, what do you sacrifice just to swing harder? I think that's an interesting, because I think that you can bring it to pitching too. It's like, just to throw harder, what are you sacrificing? Because I remember when I was and I still like, well, again, the mound occasionally, like when I'm just trying to throw as hard as I possibly can, like there's a batter standing there, but like I'm not connecting to anything about him. Like I'm just throwing the ball towards home, and like I'm hoping I blow the pitch by this guy. And I remember doing that. Like I literally remember, like there was no information I was connecting to, minus like I'm throwing this ball as hard as I freaking can to that catcher, versus like a pitcher who's connecting to the batter, where now I'm skillfully throwing this pitch. All right, I'm going to throw this pitch in a way where I'm going to make sure I'm on his hands. I'm going to throw this pitch where he's going to be reaching for it, and I'm connecting to the batter in a much different way. Or like I'm going to blow this fastball by him where it's right above his hands inside. Like that's connecting to who's right there, versus like I think I sacrifice, when I'm just trying to throw as hard as I can, I sacrifice the ability to pick up what's actually out there to act upon. And like the only thing I'm acting upon is like I'm throwing this as hard as I can. And then you get into the higher levels and balls like leave the bat pretty fast when that's all you're trying to do. And like you throw in a pretty good region for them to hit, right? So it's like I'm not being very skillful with pitching anymore. And I do think it goes to that a little bit. Like I'm not picking up information nearly as well because all I care about is moving as fast as I can, throwing as hard as I can in this one moment. I think it'd probably be similar to hitting.
Yeah, and at least on that element of it too, with as far as pitching goes, I almost think that having a target to throw to, like what to your intention too of the hitter, like I think right when it comes to coordination, it's about what am I coordinating to, and I don't know, I haven't thought about it in the way that you put of like coordinating to the batter, because to me I'm not trying to coordinate to the batter necessarily. I mean a little bit, but I'm more trying to coordinate to where I want to put the ball.
Well, I think
that makes sense.
Yeah,
but I get what you're saying. Like it's because in my head, I'm thinking about like what my coordination is to the target I'm trying to hit. But what's shaping that and shaping what I'm trying to do with the ball is the batter.
Yeah,
and so
what's a better orientation? Like, is a better orientation throwing my pitches in a way where I'm going to make the batter do something, or is it better that I'm just throwing the pitch that's called to a target? And I'm on the line of thinking right now, could change, but the better orientation and for me to pick up good information is for me to throw pitches to make the batter do something. Like I'm going to get this, I'm going to fish this guy, or I'm going to freeze him, or like I'm not going to let him hit this. I'm going to get him to back off and I'm going to land it in. And that's why I talked about one of our guys recently is like, what's a better get me over? A get me over where I see curveball called and I'm just throwing it somewhere in the zone trying to land it, or I'm a right on right and I'm going to get the righty to back off and it land there. What's a better get me over pitch? Like the better one is getting the batter to move because of how I moved and landing it there. Just think about what that may potentially do for all my other pitches later too. If I've already gotten the flinch once and I landed it, and like those probably aren't going to get hit. Like especially if you're making the batter do exactly what you want them to do. I think it's a better orientation of how you go about like having your intentions to pitch and how you shape your pitches versus we're playing a target sport. It would be great if like we got points for hitting a target, but we don't.
I mean, that's the other thing that I've been on more recently is the game doesn't care. The game doesn't care that you throw plus stuff. It doesn't care. The game doesn't care that you have elite bat speed. The game doesn't care that you have elite exit velo. It's just it doesn't care.
You hit all your spots all game. Game doesn't care.
No.
I threw exactly where I wanted to. Oh, coach, it was a good pitch. I threw a great pitch. You just hit it. I was like, okay, so it wasn't a great pitch because he absolutely destroyed it. Like it was a bad selection as far as you missed something, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's I think the part that is where a lot of coaches are right now. And this is where too why I want to bring it up in terms of like the analytics. Like I feel like people are misplacing have like misplaced emphasis on in terms of analytics, in terms of like there's like based upon the findings that an analyst has found, like this is the gospel truth on how things are. And that's where I'm like, I think an adjustment needs to be made so that analytics can serve its proper role of assisting in the search process for more functional solutions. But it's not the end all be all. And that's where I see a lot of people or organizations making mistakes is they are like, well, the metrics say this. And so, well, the metrics say that your fastball isn't or is getting hit a lot. So you should throw your fastball less, instead of asking the question like, why is your fastball getting hit a lot? Instead of just taking away a tool from the athlete. Like now they have to, like, so for example, I can't remember if this actually, well, with McCullers a little bit in the World Series, of the fact that he was just going 2 breaking balls for the majority of his at bats against hitters. And I don't think they're like, even if he had just used his fastball to try to get them off his breaking ball, like that's where guys can just adjust. If you are just a 2-pitch pitcher, I mean, some guys can be successful as 2-pitch pitchers, but if that's not if you haven't found a functional solution for that, having that tool set, then it becomes very hard for you to have sustained success. Because I bet you McCullers is really good when he has all 3 pitches working and he can start messing with guys more. And this is where, to me, the mentality of like, well, just trust the metrics. It's like, well, that works up into a point, because the thing is that your opponent isn't alive, adapting resisting, like somebody who's trying to actively work against you, like they're going to catch on to that and adapt. And that's where, to me, just saying that, oh, well, the numbers say, or the analytics say, it's going back to like they're using a model of the world going back to, I think that the quote that I said before, the world is its own best model. And it's not even my own quote. I have to go pull. It's from a physicist. Had basically said that in terms of like talking about living beings. And so I think that's the thing that we have to remember, because analytics can be a very powerful tool to help you in your search process and to like with how you want to attack. But it goes back to, once you get into the game, and people were talking about during the World Series about having a plan. And I think plans are good. You should have a plan. But once you get in there, like then you need to start pick up information about like what's actually going on. Instead of being like, well, the plan says this, so therefore if I just execute this plan the way that we had talked about it before, like it's just going to work out. Like, well, if they start changing what they're doing and your plan doesn't match what they're doing, then it's going to be rough for you. And I think that's where you see sometimes teams just lose simply because the other team didn't adjust to what the other team was doing, or one team wasn't adjusting to what the other team was doing. And that's why they lost.
Yeah. The idea of adaptability. I think that speaks a lot to other stuff I've been thinking a lot about, and how do we create environments? Again, this is a whole nother rant, so I'm not going to go into it, but like, how do you create athletes who are adaptable under any circumstance? Because that's what it comes down to. It's like, you want solutions under any context, under any situation that will actually function. So yeah, I don't know if we should change subjects on that and dig into that, but yeah, I think that's extremely important.
I mean, because it's the quote that I had was like from Rommel about, in terms of like, if his plan got him into contact with the enemy, then he would just play it by ear, and through sense and tactical feel, like a duelist, like. And I thought that was really insightful in terms of, okay, use your analytics to get to know your enemy a little bit more, your opponent and yourself. But once you get in there, you're going to have to understand which parts of the plan to adhere to and which parts to let go of. Like that's where, for example, too, of thinking like, okay, once you start pitching, like, okay, what is it that I'm picking up right now? When can I deviate from the plan? When do I need to adhere to the plan? And this is where, to me, the expert, right, the elite players, there is a higher order variable that they're attuning to that helps them navigate in terms of like when to deviate and when to, like what's guiding their behavior, so to speak. And so that's where, to me, like a plan is just an initial set of conditions that you're working with. And then if the conditions stay the same, then you can just keep executing your plan. But if they change, are you going to be able to pick up that information and then adjust what you're doing? Because I think it comes back to, like, the way that I think about it is in terms of military. Okay, if you understand what your objective is, what your goal is, then whatever plan you have, okay, that you set up, if things change, but your objective stays the same, that doesn't change. Like, so to me, that's your higher order variable. And so you just adjust your plan based upon your given circumstances that are going to get you there. And like, if you just, play with, like, for example, how the SEALs and a lot of special forces are like, okay, we're going to come up with the first simplest plan of attack and go right now. If I remember correctly, they just do simple, quick planning when they're in a combat zone and just move. And then they keep reiterating and adjusting the plan as they go. I mean, that to me is the best way to approach once you're into the game, because I think that's where, like, I didn't watch the last game of the World Series, but it sounded like the Phillies were, especially offensively, were kind of, what's the word? Not searching. To me, it was like they were kind of getting desperate and kind of grasping and for solutions against the pitchers. They didn't have a way to adapt in a systematic way in some ways. Because I think at least what I'm trying to help our hitters understand is there should be a kind of a systematic way that you make adjustments in the box or from at bat to at bat, based upon what you perceive is happening. And so, letting the ball be your feedback or just your swing be your feedback and how you're relating to that, to the pitcher and to the ball. Like you need to be able to make adjustments based upon a swing that you just took on a ball, whether you fouled it off or missed it completely. Okay, do you know what you should do next? If you're getting another pitch, and like, what should you focus on? What should you, how should you attack this next pitch that you see? So the last thing that I'm going to throw in there, probably cut out, is, but I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this. So I was working with one of our 2A guys who's now just a pitcher, but we would just trade back and forth pitching to each other. And the way that I kind of put it was, this is a way of sparring or rolling. And so to me, because we weren't going full distance, I think we're probably at like 45, 50 feet. And he's just up there, not throwing like 100%, mixing in breakers and throwing different things. And I'm just like, this to me, if we could do more of this, you'd be unbelievably way better. Because to me, this idea of when you spar and you roll, you're not actually trying to beat the other guy up. You're not trying to bury him and get him out, so to speak. Instead, you're trying to, if we're good sparring partners, we're trying to challenge the other person. We're exploring while we're sparring. We're trying out different things. And then sometimes we have to ramp up and down the intensity so that it stays in a place where we can both learn and grow. And so sometimes you have to, as maybe you're more talented than the guy you're sparring with, you actually might have to dial it back a little bit and not carve him quite as much and be a little bit more creative with how you're interacting with them. And I think that's, I want to understand MMA culture or fighting culture a little bit better, because there's where the best growth is like, there's a culture of that. I don't know. Did you listen to that guy talk at SMSC? At the Sport Movement Skill Conference, who is an MMA guy?
No, like that was like one of the only ones that I forget what I had to do, but like I was almost there for all. He's one I meant to go back and listen to, but I've actually been listening to a lot of like naturally with Conor McGregor. Like I've been intrigued with fighting, and like I watched his most recent documentary. Sean actually sent it to me on Twitter, and then like just some other stuff. I've listened to like Sean break down Israel Sonnet. I would mess up his last name.
Adesanya.
Adesanya, yeah. But yeah, because I actually do a little bit of sparring with our pitchers, like in some form or fashion, like that. Stole straight from Rafe Kelly, but we did it today. Like you tuck the thumbs, curl the fingers, and you're like basically playing body shots. And like the whole idea of like, because I move, you move, and like trying to play that idea. And then like I wasn't thinking about like sparring for baseball. The hard part is, man, it's like I really like that idea, because I do think we would pick up extra different affordances. There's another concept, I forget what, it was from one of Sean's blogs. I was like, I wish something speed, and I forget. I wish I maybe actually have it up. No, I don't have it up. Dang it. But it was something about.
I think I know kind of what you're talking about.
It was like roughly 80% of their actual speed is where they may pick up different things, and that's where they lived a lot. As far as where they practice, and I was like, how can like putting that to pitching, like I think you could like play off the sparring idea where you could pitch at like 80% to a hitter, but still like you're still trying to like get him to do what you want him to do based on how you're throwing your pitches. And I think there's a ton of value in that. It's kind of like the idea of sparring, but I think the limitation in that is just like you have like we'll have 18 to 20 pitchers. We have one game mound, right? We don't have a cage that can actually match that really well, just where we're at. The cages are kind of small. Maybe we could get a mound in there and it'd be a shortened version of it, which I think still has value. But like that's a limitation in my opinion, because I think there's a ton of value in it. Like I always thought there was, like having pitchers throw to the hitters in a setting like that where you're kind of sparring and you're working at like the 80% range potentially. And like,
and this is the and two, I also think that it's important too that the pitchers or even the hitters mess with how, like, so for example, if I'm pitching and I'm throwing to a guy, I'm not trying to carve him. I'm actually trying to every now and then. So for example, based upon my sequence or whatever, I might specifically try to throw one in there that I think he can hit to see if he's ready. Like there's that element of it too, of like, if pitchers, I think, should understand that when they throw and they start mixing a little bit and then they throw a cookie in there after a guy's seen a bunch of different stuff, he's not always ready to hit that pitch. And I've seen that plenty of times where they'll take a swing and they'll just miss it.
Yeah.
On a pitch that they should crush and that they've hit well in the past, but simply because of the previous pitch sequence, they're just not ready for it. And so I think that's even good for your offense too, is like just understanding that it's not when you're sparring, it's not just about you. And that's the thing that I think is the important piece of like when you're doing this and you have your own guys doing it, it's not about necessarily trying to carve the other guy up. It is, you should throw some pitches in there and see too, like, okay, if I throw a ball in there for him to hit, can I sequence it in such a way that, like, because it'll help you understand when you can just straight attack a hitter and not worry about, like, if I hang this pitch, if I leave this pitch over the middle of the plate, like knowing when to take that risk of like, I'm just going to lay this sucker in there and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. And so like, to me, that's one of the elements of, and I'm not sure what on the hitting side to do. I think if like you're crushing a guy, maybe you need to change where you're, like what you're doing in the box, you know, maybe where you're standing, maybe start playing with some different moves or whatever, and just seeing what else you can explore and just make it harder for yourself. You know, maybe starting with like a different count, whatever. I think that's, I mean, I've always had this idea that pitchers and hitters should actually train together. And
which just makes sense, right? It just makes sense.
It does. And the other element of it too is I actually think the pitchers don't need to throw and shouldn't throw at the full 60 feet, 6 inches when they're sparring, just simply because it's really hard to, like, again, your accuracy is different, you know, and just when you're all the way at 60 feet, 6 inches, and then how hard you have to throw it just to get it to the plate is also increased just at that distance. So if you just bring it in a little bit, and that's where, to me, what I've noticed is when you throw at 30 feet or whatever it is most BP throwers throw at, guys are like, even when I throw you a breaking ball, guys still seem to be able to hit that fairly well. But then when I back it up to 45 feet, all of a sudden those breaking balls get a lot harder to see out of the hand. A lot harder to see out of the hand. It's harder to see the spin. And I think that's where more deception happens when over that course of like the ball flight being a lot longer and having to travel a further distance. I really think that is something that people don't appreciate when it comes to the hitting side of it. And so I think that's why, for me, it's like, I would actually, if I could, put the pitchers at least, I don't know what the minimum distance is, Robert, that would be more for, again, this is part of the whole point of like this podcast, is understanding where does an analyst become really, really useful? To me, it's right here of like, where can we figure out where that sweet spot is in terms of ball flight of, okay, when there's that kind of that tipping point where guys can start to see spin. Cause this is one of the other things where like, we're like, oh, they can't see spin. And it's like, I don't believe that for a second. I know some guys can see spin. The question is when do they start to see spin? Because as the ball gets closer, guys who have good vision can probably start to pick that stuff up. Guys with better vision might pick it up earlier, but still most guys at some point will start to see that. And so maybe not most guys, but there'll be some. And so like, to me, this is something that I think research and analytics would be really good at, trying to parse out where is this balance point that we begin to see an effect come into play as far as the distance of the pitcher away from the hitter.
Yeah, I think it's, as us as coaches need to engage in a little exploration to see where that potentially maybe, and based on how the hitters coupling their actions to the pitchers. But yeah, no, I think there's a ton of value in that because I did it a little bit when I was just trying to ramp up the information the hitters were getting at our Inspiration Academy, like before the playoffs. And it was like I would actually go in the base of the mound. There's still an L screen there, so I certainly wasn't doing that without an L screen. But like I was throwing my pitches, and like it felt, at least for me, like as a pitcher, like somewhat realistic. Like I was at a much lower intensity, but I could still throw my pitches. I could still make a move. I could still use pretty much my entire arsenal in some ways, and I could even like explore and create a little bit in different ways. And like the better hitters were able to kind of couple their actions and go at it. Like I kind of carved in the beginning, so I had to like find that fine tune, like where should I be living, and maybe I should have backed myself up. But I still think there's a lot of value in them getting challenged at that. Since I mean we did face a 97-mile-an-hour arm, like that probably had some value in there. But I also found the term movement, it's ownership speed.
Yes.
Like the
Yes.
idea of the movement ownership speed. And I think that's a little bit, I was thinking about that a lot for pitching. Like, where is that? And how do I keep that a little more coupled to the actual information? So like, we do a lot of stand-ins, we do a lot of umpires, but like guy swinging is just so much better, man. It's just like, that's the actual information. And I've noticed even with stand-ins, even with moving around stand-ins, even with a stand-in and an umpire, like our pitchers were not coupling their actions to certain affordances. I thought they would. I thought they would take some invitations based on certain hitters, like that were presenting like this in this situation. Like we should have done this, and I don't know why we missed that affordance in the landscape. And I was like, it's because we don't have batters, and they're not. Even if I have a stand-in, they're not connecting to the information the same way. They could very much just become a rote repetition, like just trying to throw your pitches. Even if
there's no consequence. Like exactly. I think that's the other element of
other than walks. Like I still have like that idea in there, which I think is extremely important. But yeah, and that's where another thing I was thinking. Again, we're going to go down a whole rabbit hole in this, but the other thing I was thinking too is like, can I put like does this play if I can't get a hitter for pitchers? Does this play if I were to give them context about who this hitter is? And like what they could potentially do ahead of time, and then they throw a pitch that, like, based on the parameters we set up about the hitter they're facing, like meets the criteria of like that ball may have been crushed. Like actually, like that ball is crushed. Like, all right, man on second here. And is that even enough of a consequence? And would that help them couple their actions more? I think maybe, possibly, I don't know, but it's definitely not the same.
Well, I mean, because to me, there's an element of, when you have a batter who's swinging in there, it begins to highlight certain information
for sure.
And moves, like movements that the batter makes, because it highlights that it makes that information speak louder. Whereas when they're just taking and they're just standing in there, I think sometimes that information, again, back to there's no consequence there. It doesn't then make that information more salient, or it doesn't highlight it as much. It's just information there, and, because it doesn't specify anything to them. Yeah. Because again, going back to like, what is it their goal that they're trying to do there?
Analyzing.
Because that's where I'm wondering, how much is this stuff, like, what are the metrics that I really want to look at? Because I mean, I have Johnson pulling a ball. Where's Johnson? Probably a second round. Oh, yeah. He pulls the ball at like 78. I think it was something. You're like, whoa, that didn't even feel like it swung harder. I'm like, but dude, it's inside your bat speed. It's just going to measure it faster on an inside swing, I'm going to assume. Inside and low are generally what I've seen in the past. There you go. There's your 78.
The lower the pitch, the higher the bat speed. To an extent, obviously, like,
right, because that wasn't that 78 was not that low of a pitch. Oh, yeah, that was low enough.
Also, a trick for you. I see that you're like commenting like timestamps. You can actually like use YouTube's embedding to like automatically go to it. That makes sense?
No.
Okay.
Explain.
I've seen
I'll
that
show you.
before. I've definitely seen that.
I mean, I was going to put it in the comment or in the description, but I just wasn't logged. I was logged in with my account and not the school one.
Oh yeah.
But what are embeds? Oh, you're talking like the things down here?
Not necessarily. Here, I'll show you. I gotta.
Yeah, do a
Yeah.
share screen.
Well, I can type it in on the.
On the
I can
chat.
type
the
it
old
in.
chat.
I'm just trying to think of the exact terminology of it, and I don't want to tell you the wrong terminology.
But you're saying that on plane efficiency was maybe something more to look at?
Right, because like in my experience with the guys I've worked with, when we see like bat speed trending up,
Mhm.
right? Like whether it be a heavy bat program or like a heavy bat, light bat, whatever kind of program that you want to use. I typically found that as your bat speed increases, your on plane efficiency will typically decrease. And what does that mean exactly? Well, your bat doesn't stay in the zone as long. And you'd be really good at crushing that specific pitch in that specific spot. But again, when we want to talk about being adaptable, dexterous athletes, being able to adapt and adjust to certain pitches is where a metric like on plane efficiency is key, because if your bat stays in zone longer, you can still adjust and still make a quality swing. That may not be the best terminology for it, but we'll go with it on that end to be able to increase your chances of getting a hit or something like that.
Doesn't work when I do that, huh? Doesn't like it when I make it full screen. Because I don't know. I'm a little bit questioning some of these negative attack angles, which then makes me question how correct are or is the on plane score. That's what I want to know. Like, how accurate are these things? Now, having used this again, because when I first used it with my guys at DCTC long time ago, well, a couple of, I don't know, I want to say three-ish years ago, 3 years ago, and comparing it to Zap, I saw 0 negative attack angles on guys that I thought would have negative attack angles. Everybody was positive attack angles.
On blast
And
or
now
zap?
I'm starting to see more negative attack angles. And some of it makes sense where I'm seeing it. And then it just makes me wonder, okay, this is where, Robert, you would probably have better data for this. But now I need to figure out, okay, do I want to get Rapsodo hitting or hit tracks? And now I have like all these metrics lined up, and we can look at exit velo and bat speed and attack angle and all these sort of things that we can then begin to see, okay, if you're negative attack angle, does that mean maybe Rapsodo would be better? Because then you could start to see the spin, get the spin metrics going, but you could see the ball spin and then see, are you creating too much spin and the ball is just like hanging up there? Because from the naked eye, it seems to me guys that swing down on the ball and they clip it a ton, they put a ton of spin on the ball and it just kind of hangs up there. The ball doesn't seem to just jump off the bat and just go. Instead, it just seems to go up and it just seems to hang up there. And then you're like, wow, that ball took forever to go however far it went. And its hang time was really long. And so that's where I'd want to know, does a negative attack angle produce more of those spinny fly balls versus getting on plane with it, hitting it more true, produces that nice, rocket line drive where the ball just seems to like fly off the bat.
Well, from like I want to say a physics standpoint, but like assume the ball is right-handed curveball is breaking, right? You let's say you can physically see the seam orientation moving, and then you have a negative attack angle. When you make contact with it, you would assume that it would the spin would transverse, I think is the word, and then would create that, that very spinny baseball that you were mentioning. But again, in my world of being an analyst, it's by how much does that spin change.
Right. Well, and that's too where I was also wondering, okay, now that we're seeing some of these, like, it's really cool to see, at least to me, like, we get batted ball information connected with the bat speed that we see. Because these balls seems like they're coming off the bat pretty well. And that was only a 64 bat speed, and the ball seemed to just jump off his bat. Granted, it's in the cage, but still, those balls seem to like be flying off the cage, and that was what, 64? So that's where I'm kind of curious, because this guy's going to be one of our better. He should be more of a power hitter, but he's going to be more of a contact singles, doubles type guy for us. And he has fairly decent contactability, but his bat speed
Now,
just isn't.
my question is, when you say fairly decent contactability, how are you measuring?
I'm doing the old coach thing in terms of what I've seen on the field. So if you're to look at his spray chart,
Okay.
you're going to see a lot of line drives, and he's probably going to work more of the gaps. So, and that's what I mean of like, I'm sure his if he were to go and take his hardest swing, he'd probably be in the 70 range. But you can see him with guy, like, this is why I wanted to do it off a machine or something that's a little bit more challenging, because you begin to see, I know some of these guys have higher bat speeds. If I were to put them on a tee and have them swing as hard as they could, he'd easily be in the in the 70 range, no problem. And I had another kid who has had decent exit velo on flight scope, like the 90 to 93. His top was maybe he touched 70 once. So that's where, for example, you look at Johnson. Johnson hits off this machine all the time. So that's why I assume his bat speed is going to be in the higher. It's going to be closer to his true max because he's more comfortable hitting off the machine and letting it eat. Whereas these guys, the freshmen, aren't as comfortable hitting off the machine. Their numbers are going to be a little bit lower. But like, for example, if I were to go to Stifter here, I'm trying to scroll on the screen share. Great. His EV or his bat speeds are like nothing special. Like low 60s, upper 50s. And I was, using flight scope in the indoor. His exit velos were topping out at like 86. But then, because I've used it in game with him, he's hit like a 94 or something in game. So your question is what everybody talks about bat speed, right? Bat speed, because it equals exit velo. This kid doesn't have elite bat speed, but I know he can hit the ball 90 plus miles an hour off the bat. And he's going to be mostly a singles doubles guy. So that's where, I'm kind of wondering, I'm asking the question, how much does it matter when I know and I've seen what guys in-game exit velo is? In terms of like what numbers I'm seeing here, how do I evaluate this in light of those things, right? Like he's mid 60s, 64, 65 kind of was his top end range, but you could see his range was like 58 to 64, 65.
The one question I have regarding that is, when you change batters, are you switching out bat length and sizes?
They're all swinging 33s.
Oh, so everyone's swinging 33, 30.
Yeah, and
presumably?
I'll be honest, when I first started doing it, and this was before I got the live stream to work, it was on a 32 or something like that. And so they were probably nerfed a little bit, but then I eventually changed it and found a 33 bat and changed it to a 33. And so they were all 33 whatever 33 30s.
Right.
At least I
'cause
think that's what it was supposed to be.
I know in my experience, like with a higher, like let's say a batter has a 34, but on blast he has a 33. You're gonna tend to see like higher exit or not exit, bat speed because they
Bat
think
speeds
they're
with the
swinging
longer
at, like,
bat when you're actually using a shorter one.
yeah.
Yep.
And then vice versa, you're gonna see slower when they think you're swinging heavier. Even though I might be mixing that up. No, it's sounds about right. But then in terms of like what you were mentioning, he's got, like the player you were just mentioning, uh, how you said, he get like 94 max exit velocity, but you don't see bat speeds in the, high setting. It's wondering if how much of the bat speed that you use in practice training really applies into a game setting. Because like what I found at Quincy was if we were swinging roughly 68 miles an hour on bat speed on average, that would equate to roughly 56, 55, 56 in a game. Because again, the setting is different. You more or less know. And Baker can be able to comment on kind of like this point because it kind of ties in with pitching where you may not have as much effectiveness when you're throwing like max fastball velocity, and the same can apply for swinging a baseball bat. But there are those tangible people that maybe for that one player, like maybe 60 is around his max bat speed, and like he's very good at basically swinging around his max both in practice and games. So there's that subset of people that on the pitching side, let's say their max fastball is 94, like they can command 92, 94, whereas some of them like max fastball is 94, doesn't know where it's going, but you drop them down to like 89, 91, they're a little bit more effective. Same applies here where you're not trying to swing as hard as you can, you're trying to swing in an effective manner where it can still be effective, but you're still like, again, there's bat speed at a peak level, but then there's a controlled bat speed. Which again, I'm not telling you like swing soft, but swing in a manner that allows you to still enhance what we looked at. What we found important was on-plane efficiency.
Makes sense. Because yeah, this is we had it at 96 or whatever it was. It was the same kid in game. 96.4. Right? And this goes back to with him, he's not going to be your home run type hitter guy, but he's going to hit. Like I didn't think it was possible just based upon what I saw in the cage in the early preseason and the exit velos that we were getting, and then going back to the bat speed. We're like, there it is.
Right. And like the common misconception, at least to the subset of people that know like the bat speed formula in terms of like working back from exit velocity, the issue with that is that that collision coefficient, that 0.2, that's been tested on only wood bats. So metal bats apply a little bit different. And so you need to adjust accordingly based upon that collision coefficient, which again, it's more of like that's a bit above my knowledge in terms of like how to compute that, in terms of, what is exactly the collision efficiency of a metal bat compared to a wood bat. But again, that's another misconception. So that's why you might see like either A, lower bat speed numbers, B, higher bat speed numbers. I'm not exactly sure, but there's still that misconception to that subset of people.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I've heard, and this would be curious to hear your thoughts. Wood bats, especially the ones that the pros use, may be actually a little bit hotter than the BB core bats that the college guys use right now. What are your thoughts on that?
I've heard similar things, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. Again, like I'm not. This is all off speculation. Like I don't have a present data in front of me to say like, yeah, this claim is supportive. But yeah, I believe that there is. But the one way we could test it, theoretically, because think about it this way: you're at a JUCO right now, right? The NJCAA and the CCCAA are metal bat JUCOs, but the NWAC in the Pacific Northwest, they use wood bat. So if you could do some kind of analysis where like you take a group of teams in the NJCAA and the CCAA, compare with a group of teams in the NWAC, then maybe you could start to see, oh yeah, actually, wood bats might be hotter.
But I also think it's a type of wood bat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you grab one of the ash bats, like Louisville Slugger that you can get at Dick's for what's now an absurd amount of money, when it used to be $20. I don't know how much it is now, but I mean, I would assume that those wood bats aren't nearly as hot as the maple, what are Victus, like the top end bats that the pros are using today. Like those bats, like you just listen to the sound of the bat and how much it comes off. I wonder though if the baseball bat bros have actually done a video, looking at this. It wouldn't surprise me if they have.
It'd be something interesting to look at.
Baseball bat bros? I've never heard of them.
Yeah, they go and they test different bats, and they go in and whether they go hit out on a field or go find a facility with a Hit Trax or a Rapsodo, and they just do exit velo numbers based upon the different bats that they're checking out. So
I mean, there's some. I feel like there's some real juiced metal bats nowadays, though. I feel like BB. I could be wrong, because I'm a pitcher. So I mean, take it with a grain of salt. But I feel like the BB core now isn't what BB core was like when I was started. Right?
that's fair.
It came out like senior year of high school, and those are like those. I felt like they're dead. So I got like the goods. I feel like the goods is kind of that thing's got some juice to it. It feels more like the old Besters to me. I don't know.
And this is where it might be, where things are changing, right? Each new model of bat that comes out with aluminum. But I brought all this up because of what you were saying, Robert, in terms of the coefficient maybe being different. It could be that the sweet spot's a little bit bigger on the metal bats than it is on the wood bats, or vice versa. I don't know, and that's where I think it's interesting, and that's why I keep coming back to, it's good to have other metrics to kind of validate what the metrics that you're looking at. And I think this kind of goes into the topic that I wanted to cover today, which was Goodharts Law, where when you set up a metric as a target, and use it as a measure, it ceases to be what your goal is. I have to pull up this actual article, make sure I get it right.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. It's like when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be
a good measure.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, man, I would love to get your thoughts first, Robert, on this before I go off on a tangent on the Twins.
I mean, there's some validity to it. Like, I see it as, like, oh, we only chase, this thing, right? Like, oh, we only chase one thing only, bat speed. Right. Then again, I see the validity of it because now, hey, you're gonna you're going to have guys that can swing really fast, maybe put up good exit velocity numbers, but in the grand scheme of things, like you're sacrificing something else. Maybe you're sacrificing, the adaptability of being able to spray the ball to various places. One, two, being able to just make contact in general. So I think in terms of like measures becoming targets, I think if it's the way I see it is if it's just one measure becoming a target, then yeah, it fails to be a good measure. But if you kind of take a collection that kind of like in a like checks and balances sort, where like this metric is good, but we need to have the quality metric B to be able to validate in some way metric A. So that's where I see on that end.
Baker, you got any thoughts?
I mean, I want to slow you down here, but I feel like this is something I've been talking a ton about, is like trying to figure out what the actual goal is, what we're trying to do. Because I think a lot of guys, especially coming into JUCO, like have their thoughts about what they need to work on, and that's what the one thing I've been collecting a ton. It's just kind of like in my own way, just trying to get in their brains a little bit, and always trying to get them to produce something that they're working on or building on. Like you're already good at this, or building on this. You need to work on this to be the best pitcher you can be. So like I had them like submit this to me, and I'm going to continue to have them submit to me. But like you start noticing what they're caring about and what they're valuing, while I'm trying to kind of preach the idea and try to get like all that matters is that we're functional pitchers in game, right? And like we are getting outs. Like that's one thing I talk a ton about, is like we're the out getters, and like just continue to hound. Like I don't care how you do it. We gotta find 3 outs as fast as we can find 3 outs. We gotta find 3 outs. All those metrics that we're chasing, like all feed into it. Even like a bunch of guys like, oh, I need to get bigger. Okay, well, great. That's something that may be worth striving for. But if all we do is get bigger, I've seen plenty of people just get bigger and then they become a heck of a lot less functional. I've seen a heck of a lot of people like taking more calories and didn't get any better. I've seen a heck of a lot of people sell out for velocity, tick up the velocity, but they didn't get it better at pitching. So it's like trying to figure out how to keep people on target to what's actually the main goal and how those feed, versus just like I'm selling out for this, losing sight of like what's actually important. And that's kind of one thing I'm actually digging into now. And I thought that thing that you sent us about that very specific article was kind of fed right into what I was already talking about with our guys.
Well, into how I found it was one of those very serendipitous things, because somebody was posting about the Twins and they didn't understand why Pagan is still pitching for the Twins. And it's like, well, it's because the Twins see that he has some of the top 10 in stuff. And it's like, yes, but the guy gives up too many runs. Like, right. Because I think going off of what you said, I think you, Baker, you made a good point of adding the caveat of the whole job of the pitchers is to get outs as quickly as they can. And I think baked within that is the whole goal of a pitcher is to prevent runs, to minimize the number of runs given up.
Yep.
And I think it also depends upon your role, right? So for example, if you're a starter, you're afforded more of an opportunity to give up runs. It's not the same for a reliever. It's just the nature of what it is that we're asking you to do is to come in and basically not allow any runs, like one or none. I mean, most often. And when that's the case, then it becomes like with Pagan, okay, you've got great stuff, but you're not getting, you're allowing too many runs. And this is where I think the analytics side of it then needs to actually dig a little bit deeper. Like, why is he giving up a ton of runs, even though he's got great stuff? And I think that part is probably the part that's missing, because I've talked with someone who's been in similar organizations who they've emphasized, certain things when it comes to the analytics. And then he started asking them basic questions of like, well, have you looked at, the counts? Like, okay, so his fastball's getting hit. And then you just tell him that he can only throw 4 fastballs in a game, or per inning. And it's like, well, why is his fastball getting hit? Is it because he's falling behind too much and he's trying to get back into counts by using his fastball to get him back into counts and that's where he's getting hurt? Or is it, a certain location that he's throwing it? Can't remember what the other things that he said, but they're all very like contextual baseball questions. It's like your analytics team should be able to tell you this and should have broken down further and done more homework to understand why is it that his fastball is getting hit so that you can better understand how to utilize that pitch. Because it's like, okay, if he just goes all, breaking balls or sliders, then guys are just going to sit on the slider if they know that that's what's coming. And an example that I saw this past year was with the former team that I worked with at Missouri State, where one of our guys out of the pen, he was really, really good. And everybody knows he's a slider guy. So he comes in out of the pen. And this year he didn't have as much success because I think guys just are practice hitting more sliders because, right, this is something that I think Cal Bodie has said on Twitter. Look, the off-speed usage is way higher now than ever. And if you go back to the premise that at the professional level and just even at the top collegiate level, guys who are there are the best adapters, right? They're the best at making adjustments out of anybody, and that's why they're at the level that they're at. And so if you start throwing them more sliders or more breaking balls in general, they're just going to get better at hitting more breaking balls. And so then you're just going to come back to the other way, and it's just going to be the seesaw back and forth. And if you really want to have, this is where, for example, looking at someone like Zach Greinke is really actually, it's fun to watch him pitch because he is always messing with the hitter. He's changing speeds. He is, pitching backwards, or he's basically throwing the pitch that he thinks that the hitter is not ready for, or that's going to fool him or whatever. And so to me, that's where we actually need to get to. And that goes back to where like, if you just tell a guy that he can't use his fastball as much, then he can't use that as a weapon to set up his other pitches. And that's an old school baseball thing of like establish the fastball so that you can set up your other pitches. But I don't think you necessarily have to say that anymore of establish the fastball. You just use the fastball to set up, your other pitches, or use your other pitches to set up the fastball. And that's where, to me, if we go back to an ecological approach, we don't want to overly constrain a player to have to basically play the game with one hand tied behind their back. And I think that happens too often to players is we actually hamstring them when it comes to their ability to play the game. In my mind, what my goal is I'm trying to give them as many options and tools as possible to use or take into a game to find success and to be able to get outs, get hits, etc.
Yeah, to go off the last point, I think once you kind of like over constrain them, they're not even picking up the information they should be picking up anymore. Since like why would you're losing, you're basically taking away options, and now you're looking for opportunities to act or maybe select a certain pitch or throw a certain pitch in a certain area, and you basically took one off the table. So now you're only looking for you're basically, your intentions is to throw this one pitch, and your selection's gone way down. So you've basically eliminated some information sources that there's no point of using them anymore. So it's like you're almost like not playing the game anymore, in my opinion. It's like a totally different game when you're over constraining versus like what you're kind of talking about, like open them up, allow them to explore different tools. And like one thing I've been thinking a ton about, and I'd be curious kind of off of this, kind of your thoughts, because one thing I did 2 years ago is I kind of intentionally eliminated pitches for guys where I wanted to basically dominate. And I took this from a very successful Division I pitching coach who's like, he wanted them to have two best pitches and possibly a third. After that, we're kind of getting rid of the rest. And like I kind of took that and ran with it a little bit. And I was like, all right, so I want your two best pitches and maybe a third. And that's all we're working on. So I don't want to spend your time on stuff. But now I'm kind of like shifting my mindset a little bit. And it's like, can I take more of a generalist approach on this a little bit? And like, is there time for me to just literally allow guys to explore ways to move your fastball? So you have a bunch of different variations of your fastball, maybe different variations of your curveball. Because in different situations, based on context, like a different variation of that same pitch may be very functional. And then as you're doing that, you're teaching them to pick up different information sources to be able to act upon. And you're basically, to me, it's a whole different game of pitching than compared to like, I have my fastball and I have my breaker, and I'm gonna throw it as hard as I can. I'm gonna throw the breaker as hard as I can. And this is typically where they work in the zone, which is good. But I think it constrains you sometimes. Is what happens when you don't have that. Well, then what? You don't even have another plan. Like you don't. It's not there. Like I've been collecting as much data as I can, so we know where you get swings and misses. We know what pitches you get swings and misses. You know, like what pitches you can put in the zone, what counts we should be using, all that. But then at the same time, like the moment you lose it, what happens? Like you're not. The only information source you know is to throw this fastball as hard as I can in this location and throw my breaker in this location as hard as I can, since they usually work. What happens when it's not there, right? So I've been thinking through that a lot, possibly changing my philosophy on it, or like maybe picking certain guys where I'm constraining them, but opening up. You're allowed to use within this framework. So yeah, we're putting guardrails on them, but allowing other guys to maybe explore a little more, become that more generalist. And which we have some guys that already kind of like that coming in, and we have some guys that only have 2 pitches coming in. So I don't know. It's just one thing I've been thinking through a decent bit, which kind of plays off what you're talking about there.
Well, and to build off of that, right? What we've, at least what I think I've seen on Twitter, hearing that Ohtani added another pitch, right? And how much, like how that's increased his ability to be very devastating and an effective pitcher. And what I think this, especially for starters, right? There's the third time through the order penalty. But if you have that fourth pitch or whatever, you start mixing that in once you get to the third time through, or you start using that a little bit more, all of a sudden, I think it helps reduce that penalty. I would assume that that's the case. Granted, I don't think, Robert, maybe this would be something for you to look up. How many innings did Ohtani go the last time out, or when he started adding that, what was it, cutter or splitter? No, it wasn't splitter. He's had the splitter for a long time, but I can't remember what.
Could be wrong,
but I thought he went 7, which is still good. I'm so used to watching the Twins where everybody goes like 4 innings. So when somebody goes 7, you're just like, that's a real, like you went a real, like a super long outing, but that's not super long by general standards. Like that used to be the norm. And I think that's where I find it really interesting, kind of what's going on in the pitching world, just in the sense of we've been seeing like this idea of staffing it more, using openers, etc. And in a way, the Twins have kind of done that, and it's kind of worked out. I think now their bullpen situation's a little bit better, at least from what in the last game that I watched. Like they've kind of figured out what their 3 or 4 guys are, and they're getting some guys back healthy. But I think that's where it becomes a challenge, at least from what I've seen over the course of 162 games. You run out that bullpen, in a staff mentality for that many games. I don't know if your bullpen holds up as well when you run them out there that frequently. Like that I think is where that model might work great in the short term, but I don't know if it works over the long haul when guys actually, their usage starts going way up.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I didn't really think about that specifically, but I would tend to agree with that. And I think it's just more times like Team C guys, team relievers, right? Maybe limited going into the postseason, but if they're throwing all the time, like every team's going to have more opportunities to see every reliever. It's going to benefit them, in my opinion.
You would think so. Robert, what do you got?
Yeah. I got a few things. So 1, yes, it was 7 innings. 2, to go like way back on a point. So like when you mentioned Zach Greinke mess with timing, there's actually someone with the White Sox right now, Johnny Cueto, that's doing a very good job of messing with timing.
I wanted to bring him up, but I didn't know what his ERA was, because that
his ERA is under 3.
Yeah, he's doing well.
He is, assuming he pitches how he's been the entire season, this will be his 4th best season of his career, behind all the Royals, and then once with, I think, actually no, twice with the Reds. But to kind of piggyback off both your points, right? There is that value of how do we pitch when we know we don't have our best stuff that day, because that's still something internal, like Baker mentioned. It's not as easy as, hey, I got to throw this pitch in this spot, every time, because frankly, you just can't do that. But it's also being able to, possibly have the data there for you. I mean, different learners, different environments, etc. Or B, the pitching coaches there saying, hey, like, here's what you're doing differently. Here's how we can adjust. Because like at Quincy, we had a specific example, specific pitcher who was like a high spin, high carry guy all in the fall. And he would succeed there. And then in the spring, something happened, don't know, kind of went different. But then it was a lot of more or less struggles because like the plan was to have him throw more up in the zone, but then he had a flatter fastball, so then he got hit hard. So then we had to adjust accordingly. And so there was times where he's like, yeah, I felt really good. The fastball was carrying. And then there's other times where he's like, yeah, I don't feel it. So then we think of like a plan B in advance where it's like, okay, if you don't feel like your fastball's going up, go ahead and play down in the zone and use it, more or less change it to a sinker. And so the idea behind that is just, again, I'm a big proponent of preparation, just making sure to be prepared when, your stuff is not working that day, adjust accordingly. Or, hey, we can go look at the data. Hey, here's your fastball metrics. This is far fetched from what you normally throw. Here's what we're going to do to adjust it for today.
Yeah, and I think it was the Yankees. Yeah, it was the Yankees using this. So they were using Trackman pregame. I watched the Rays Yankees game. They had Trackman rolling, and it was Cortez talking about another guy messing with timing, Nestor Cortez, when he was actually really, really tearing it up early in the season. But it just kind of like he just had it rolling there. I mean, they looked at it like once or twice, but I think it was just giving him a look into how his ball was playing that day, and it kind of helps you make a game plan. Again, there's a limitation to that, I think, because there's a big difference between bullpen and game, in my opinion, and we're talking about that as a staff a little bit today, and kind of like understanding the differences, and like I think everybody's, which I think is really fun. Like you had the terrible day in the pen, and you go tear it up in the game. Like you're a lot more attuned in the game than you are in the pen, and that's a good question to figure out why. I kind of challenge some of our guys to like think through that a little bit. But you're acting upon much better information within the game than you are in the pen. Like we've all had that, and I've had that plenty of times in my own career. I've seen plenty of players talk about that, right? But it's like going off of one thing you said there, Robert. It's like having that plan B ahead of time, and I think like opening up the toolbox. Like you look at a Cueto, Greinke, Cortez. Like in a way, it's like almost a wiffle ball baseball, and I think we don't think of it that much. But you watch a dude with a wiffle ball and his buddies with a bat there, like he's gonna do all kind of crazy stuff. I remember like messing with timing, striding across, coming across, like throwing different angles, and like it was just any way I could possibly find a way to get out. And we didn't have one of those wiffle balls you can make it move like crazy. It was like all the holes in it. So like the thing went straight most of the time. So it's like you have to find every way to get out, and like taking that approach to the mound, and it's kind of cool. Like the Cuetos do, the Grenkes do, I think, and the Cortezes do. It just opens a toolbox. Even you don't have your best stuff. Well, I can still probably mess with timing a little bit. I can still change arm slots, and those are just different variations of the stuff I already have. Again, I just think to me, in my brain, it just like connects. Like it's a whole different game you're pitching. It's not the same as like I know my metrics. I'm pitching to my metrics, and that's it. That's all I'm doing, which is good. There's 100% value in that, but there's limitations to that for sure.
Well, and that's what I think we're seeing. We're starting to see that, and I think it's good in the sense that it sucks for the team that I like to root for, but it's good, I think, for baseball in general, because then it opens you back up for, okay, there's more to that or to this than that. And it sucks for hitters because there's still a lot left in the tank for pitchers. Like if all you've done is focused on the metrics, then getting back into being way more deceptive, messing with hitters' timing, doing the stuff that Cueto and was it Nestor? I'm not as familiar with his name. Nestor, Stroman, like those guys, the way that they try to mess with timing. I mean, the fact that too, I've seen now like a guy throw from down under that's like 90. Like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting to see that happen. I figured that was just a matter of time before somebody was throwing from down under and they're going to get hit 90. Like, I mean, that's got to be just absolutely disgusting to face that.
I'm gonna plug one of our guys real quick. We got a guy in staff. He's like from down here.
Mm-hmm.
He was like first scrimmage 88. So that's kind of gross.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I like to hear.
I'm excited for that. But anyways,
And then there's another guy. So Justin Lawrence with the Rockies. He's up to 98 now. He's not like a submariner, but like he throws like a low sidearm, and he's up to 98, which is again like just unheard of.
And it goes back to, for me, looking at like, man, how are we going to prepare guys for this? And I don't think, I mean, I know this came up in our Twitter group chat of the pitching machine that is like completely adjustable and throws different pitches. I do think that like it kind of helps a little bit, but I mean, okay, so there's two things. I'm going to poke holes in my own argument that I made. The fact that there is variation in terms of the release point and the release height, right? So your extension, release height, like all of those vary from pitch to pitch, even if it's the same pitch. Like I looked at Justin Verlander, and I can't remember. It's a significant enough. It's 6 to 8 to 10 inches difference between each of those. Like you can have a range that it might not be like all the time. Those might be some outliers. I mean, so here's me poking holes in it. How much of that is just margin of error for the technology itself, right? TrackMan or whatever it is that's collecting it. I would assume it's Hawkeye now. So I would assume because I pulled the 20, like this season's data. And so I'd assume that is fairly accurate. It was interesting because I saw Paul Glazier. Basically, it was like, so what's the point of collecting all this data if, you're still looking at tolerance? If you believe things are self-organized, I can't remember exactly what the full quote was, but I was looking up like what he was talking about. And it basically just had to do with what's the margin of error when it comes to a piece of technology. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about tolerance.
So, according to the Sabre Statcast presentation in 2020, when they were going to roll out Hawkeye for the next year, in terms of like pitches themselves and like the metrics, in terms of errors, like estimated error, according to that presentation, they said that using the Hawkeye unit, prior, because they started using it 2020 before the pandemic hit. They said it was up to 99.8% of basically accuracy.
Yeah, but what does that mean in terms of inches? Right?
That's what I'm saying. And that's what I was, getting at. What does that mean in terms of inches? One, and then two, you kind of mentioned it in that chat, like then we get into the law of averages. How effective is, using the law of averages? When each
discrete event is unique in and of itself. Now, it doesn't mean that you won't ever repeat combinations, but if you're not used to that variation, how are you going to adjust to it? Because I mean, here's what I've seen based upon the research on just pitching machines from a gaze behavior standpoint. And I should pull up the paper, but it's a cricket study, and it looked at the gaze behavior of cricket batters, and all they'll do on a pitching machine, even if they put up a projection of a person pitching it, the batter just stares at the outlet where the ball comes out. I mean, why wouldn't they? And this is something that Rob Gray talks a lot about, of athletes are lazy learners, meaning they will take the path of least resistance or will find the easiest way to solve the problem consistently. And so if all you have to do is just stare at the outlet for the machine, then you never get good at picking up the information of where to find the release point on a pitcher. And what's interesting, though, at least talking with some players, and it's not true of all players, but of some players, they actually prefer hitting off of an actual person because there's more information there to tell you when to get ready, where to move, and how to move, or where to move, essentially. And so, but I still think, at least for some guys who struggle, their ability to pick up the release point and know where to look on the pitcher really is the thing that I think nobody is looking at or talking about. And that's also, I think, the biggest struggle with using a machine is that that whole element is not a factor there.
Yeah,
So
I would agree with that, especially when you start talking again. Not everybody uses it yet, but then we already talked about it. But say you start going into like your Zach Genkries and your Johnny Cuetos and your Esther Cortezes who are messing with timing on top of that and coming out of a slot, like you literally get none of that out of a machine. Like that's not even a possibility. So I think machines,
unless it's that whatever that super expensive machine was that they're talking about. I mean, that's the question of like how I would assume that you could do it a little bit, but I mean, you're going to see beforehand the outlet moving. So you're going to know where the release point is if he's going to drop down because the outlet's going to have moved lower. Like you're going to, and that's where I just look at like the machine is cool, but nothing beats a live person. And this is where it becomes difficult. And I'd be curious, I suppose, Baker, I mean, I don't know when you're going to announce it, but I mean, you're at a different spot, but I guess here's my question to you is how are you wanting to train your pitchers, and especially, and is it going to help out your hitters the way that you're going to try to train your pitchers?
I mean, hopefully down the road it will. Or again, being in a new spot, we'll get there. But I mean, a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is like we're trying to get as much live as possible because honestly, the next three like sessions we have with our pitchers that are going to be touching the mound that with high intensity are all going to be live. They're going to be scaled, like tomorrow's going to be a little scaled down live, and Monday and then Friday may be a little more ramped up for what we're doing. But it's like in the fall where it's literally as much live as you could possibly get. And when it's not live, like I'm encouraging hitters to always at least stand in. Again, I know there's some research. I talked to a buddy in my mind who in MLB Oregon, they did a research and talking about how the information source is just so different and how you act upon like a stand in, like how you're tracking when you're standing in versus when you're hitting. So there may be lack of value in that, but I think there's value in for our
I agree.
pitchers looking at spacing and all that. But pitchers right now, I mean, it's always problem. There's always problem, and we're always trying to find a solution for it. So there are always hypothetical stand-ins, and we're never just throwing a glove side fastball. Like it's useless to me. It's a fastball to a righty trying to get first strike off the bat. So you're always like, there's a problem. Like we're trying to get ahead of the righty, or even with a breaker, it's like okay, there may be a different context for a pitch, but we're trying to put them in those problems as often as possible. And we'll probably be doing something similar to that in the live situations by putting people in different situations and within the live. And again, it's problem solution, just always coupled, trying to keep those together. But yeah, as far as hitters things go, I mean, I think as much as I can get my pitchers throwing against hitters, especially when we're ramped up like we relatively are now, I think there's more value in that. And you can scale it up, you can scale it down, you can do it more guided where I'm technically coaching it a little more, helping them to notice where to look or kind of like guiding them in certain ways. But if it's still live, it's a heck of a lot better than just throwing a bullpen or just taking like regular, I don't know, like 30-foot BP, right?
Yeah, I mean, because I only see that as the solution to trying to help hitters out more. I mean, I do think there's some value in doing velo machine and whatever, just something so that they can, from a perceptual standpoint, feel the pressure of velo. I think that's super important. But I wouldn't spend a ton of time on it though. Like that's
And
just my thought.
I have noticed, so really good Division One program. Like I know they spend a ton of time on the velo machine, and if they get a dude pumping like that has relatively high spin, good velo, like they're gonna hit him a little bit. They're gonna hit him around the ballpark, but then you get the left-handed flipper throwing somewhere between 83 and 86 maybe, decent little breaker, and just kind of filling it up. Like they're probably gonna lose that game, and like that's something you don't want to keep happening, right? And then you know there's a chink in the armor, and you can get beat at any time if that team has that guy and they can roll him out there. So do that data. So the velo machine helps to a certain extent, and it helps you get ready for that velo. But I mean, that's not being a very attuned, adaptable, and dexterous hitter at the end of the day. Only to one very specific variable.
I do want to kind of go back just a little bit. Let's see if I can pull this up because I did have it up
Right, I saw you
here.
pulled that up. We went down another tangent.
No, not that one. There's a different one.
Another one.
This goes for hitting when we're talking about, we're going all the way back to the beginning where we're talking about let me click on the right one. There we go. Batted ball outcomes. Because I think this is the other thing of, all right, hit the ball in the air. But the question that you should be asking is too, like, what's the hang time? So, because, okay, yeah, you can hit the ball super hard and super high, but is it going to carry far enough? For example, if you have a good defense out there that they can cover 60 feet in about 3 seconds. Well, if your hang time is 3.5, well, he's probably going another, 10 to 15 feet. So that puts him at what, like 75 feet? That means that his circle is going to start to expand more. Like you're going to be able to get balls that you smash into the gap. But if you put it up there and it hangs up there, guys have a chance of going and tracking that thing down. And so that's where, to me, hang time is another component. If you're not hitting it out of the ballpark, that plays into, if you're just, looking at exit velo and you're just looking at potentially, I'm trying to like attack angle or on plane efficiency. If you're not also looking at maybe a launch angle, that I think, especially launch angle, is going to play in there as far as how good or a quality is your hit. Because I think that's where it becomes the challenge of, okay, let's say you hit it at like a good launch angle, which is going to hang up there for about 2.5 seconds. But if it's hit right at the guy, it's probably an out. You're just seeing that enough where if it's not going over his head, then it's going right to him and he's catching it and you're out. And so that's where, to me, like it's harder, right? This is where, for me, I really like the idea of doing BP outside as much as I can. And I get it at the pro level. Pro level, I think, is different because the amount of games and how much they're outside on the field. But if we're talking about high school, college, where you're not playing as many games, and two, here's the other part of it. The players themselves don't have as many games underneath their belt either. And I think that's the other element that separates the pro guy from the college and the high school kid. And so I want to hit out on the field as much as I can. And I want to start putting out like some sort of, if I don't have fielders, I want to put something out in center field, out in right field, where the defense would be playing, so that they can get the feedback of, man, you pieced that ball up and you just hit the trash can or whatever it is that I have out in center field. Well, now you know that ball in a game, yeah, you hit it well, but that led to an out. And if the whole goal is to hit it where they're not, then we begin to learn as a hitter where on the field to hit the ball. Because, for example, I'm trying to get our hitters to understand that if you go the 6 hole here on the ground, that's actually not a bad hit. Like that works out. That gets us on base. Don't be mad if you roll a ball over and you put it in the 6 hole. That's really hard to determine when you're in the cage, whether or not that ball was going 6 hole or was going to the shortstop or going to the third baseman. And the same thing too of, you hit a little flare that probably hangs up there for 3.5 seconds. Well, this guy is probably not able to get over here and you're dropping it in over here. Like that's going for a double, even though you probably didn't have your best exit velo and your best launch angle. That's a double. And so when you're talking about your OPS, your slugging percentage, all that sort of stuff, like you're padding your stats right there. If you have the ability to, if you're a left or a right-handed hitter, to dump the ball over here, that's a very potent weapon to have in your arsenal. Like I want to say Urshela last night hit a double over in here that scored 3 runs and broke the game open for the Twins and put them ahead. And so that's where, to me, people, like everybody wants to talk about hitting it here, which I think is okay. But most guys, as you can see here, the right fielder is going to line up right straight off of second base. Same thing with the left fielder. And I don't know, maybe you can begin to see too, actually, that you have a little bit more overlap in here and there's more space over here in this window here. I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong,
But I think this area here tends to oftentimes lead to doubles. And two, if you got guys in scoring position, that guy having to run from here to over here, like you're going to be able to score from there. So that to me, if I actually want our guys to have the ability to figure out how can they keep the ball fair and work down both sides of the line. I mean, I like the idea of going here to the gaps. Like this is definitely an affordance. But for some reason, it seems as though the way most defenses are set up, until they figure out, okay, you're a flare guy as a lefty, I'm going to start playing in and I'm going to start moving over. Well, then that opens up this gap over here for you. Or if you're just an oppo guy, they shift you over this way. Well, you got this affordance over here. So that's where I think trying to teach guys, I want to have the whole field open for them, if that makes sense. And I want to focus on all of this, so to speak, or like have us work on this whole gamut versus just being right here. So that's at least what I wanted to talk about. Like when you're starting to look at what is it that we want to measure and to make targets, I think this would be something where maybe we have a sheet, and somebody's sitting there charting, okay, where on the field are they hitting it? Type of a thing. And then regardless of whether or not you have hit tracks or flight scope or trackman, like you could just simply, guy with a stopwatch and and a clipboard, and you're just marking and doing spray charts on guys. And then you could have that for yourself and work on that, with the guy standing behind the turtle. I think that would be one simple way you could actually now start to measure and quantify a guy's ability to exploit space on the field.
Yeah, see, I like that. To me, it connects a lot with the idea of what I was talking with pitching. It's like that's a whole different game because I think with the new data, people got very one dimensional and they're just trying to like plug gaps like that. That's your strategy of getting extra base hit. Well, there's other ways to get extra base hits and like exploit defenses, right? Than just trying to plug gap to gap the entire time. Is like some guys may not even have that. Like they're gonna hit it and it's gonna end up in one of those circles and it's gonna be caught every single time. Where there's other options. But two, like what you're talking about, that may open up in a whole nother affordance. If you can put it down there and you can also plug a gap, like it may start opening up something that's a little easier to put it in the gap. And to me, it's just different game. Same thing with pitching. It's like we're just chasing these metrics because this is what I thought I should be doing because the metrics are saying that and it looks good in a video or whatever it may be. I was told to do this in my training facility and without game context, and then you get into a game and you don't have your plan B or plan C, or you don't have many other options to go to be able to get somebody out, right? And then same thing here because you're always I think this is where cages hurt a ton, like you're talking about. Like you don't see where the ball's landing. You're not seeing it's a functional hit, right? You're saying, oh, that wasn't hit very hard. Like the exit velo doesn't say the same as the other one, but that was actually a more functional swing because where you were able to place the baseball, you actually beat the defense, right? So I think I actually really like this graphic. I was searching for it for a little bit. I think I kind of like how it talks about like if the ball does hang up and how quickly can they get there, and you probably measure that on the field too. Like I half wonder if you could like in BP have these circles there and like
that's what I was thinking,
which I think is really interesting.
I mean, here's what I've learned just, for the whole video setup that I showed at the beginning. And that took me longer than I wanted to set that up. Like I just from having used tech and just trying to do all this sort of stuff, like putting circles out there, I just know that depending upon where this happens in your practice, just from a straight logistical standpoint, like that's where the challenge comes of like, okay, for example, if I wanted to do the camera setup I had for our BP, it just wouldn't happen because of the flow of our practice. Like we're going to do defensive work beforehand before we do BP. Well, I'm not going to have my cameras set up necessarily. I might be able to get some of it depending upon if it's just mass fungos. But if it's a defense where we're throwing and stuff, it might be hard for me to have everything set up because balls are flying around and we may want to use use this space back here behind home plate. Like that's where I just look at like how long is it going to take you to get this set up? You know what I mean? For when you're transitioning. Like this is the stuff that if you go and look at like John Wooden, right? This is what he spent a lot of his time on, was figuring out, okay, where does the equipment need to be stationed so we can minimize the amount of downtime between activities? Because, and this is something that I really appreciate about our head coach, his goal is to try to not have guys be there for too long. And that's a mistake that I think a lot of us coaches, myself included, fall into, of we're just like, we're going to be here till it gets done. But then we don't plan very well to execute that, to get it done in a quick and efficient manner, and making sure things are like ready to go, and having like it just from a logistical standpoint, that's where I look at, okay, right, conceptually, a lot of these ideas are great, but how do we logistically get them to work out in practicality? And I think that's where the question of how do you measure out this so that you have it done like very quickly? You know, for example, of I kind of like this idea of, could I have different, because like what I did, and I spray painted spots on my field for flight scope. So, but I made sure to put them like all the way into the ground so that it's not just getting cut continually. But that also means that sometimes it's hard to find them. So that's the thing of like, okay, I wonder if you could put, spray paint little spots in your field where so then when you go out there, you just plop these things down, and really, I think you could probably just get away with like parts of the ring, like really visually, one cone here, a certain color. Maybe it's a flag. I mean, maybe that would be easier. Put out little flags like the ones that they use for, where they mark, where electrical lines are and stuff like that. Put little flags out, and then I'd probably mark here, and I'd probably maybe mark here, these parts of the circle. I think that might be with different colors, right? Because I think the colors would be helpful to know, like, okay, this one's going to be a stretch for a guy. Red is going to be he's surefire catch, and this is going to be maybe also. But I would say once you get out to this ring, it's probably going down to like maybe 75% chance of a catch.
Yeah, I would. Right. But people less fortunate that have turf fields, we can't spray paint or
it's true.
Or put flags. So I mean, us less fortunate people don't have that affordance. So I'd have to use cones. But our head coach actually did something. It's not like this, but we used cones, and I think it was more gaps. I don't really know what he was doing. It seemed pretty good, but it's like it was just like one day where we had more time, where BP was kind of up front. And it wasn't going to interfere with anything we're doing up front. Like, he just goes and sets up all the cones. Him and another assistant ahead of time. Takes a little time, but I feel like once you do it once or twice, and you can have. I don't know if that's an every time thing to me, but I think if you highlight it once or twice, it's going to give the guys an idea of it, and then you can have real fielders over there, and they would have a general idea of the spacing, right? It kind of gives them, maybe makes them a little more, to use more ecological terms, like a little more sensitive to that information, right? Kind of where it may be caught, not caught. So I think that's where my mind kind of went with it. It'd have to be like a practice where you're like, we're doing BP up front. You can get there to the field ahead of time, have that already set up, and kind of like at least allow them to interact with that like once or twice.
I want to give. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
I wonder if there's a way. Now, this is kind of like a big brain idea, but like basically like building out like a more or less like a giant protractor in a way, where you plant the stake at whatever center spot you want, and then you have like red string 30 feet, blue string 45 feet, and then black string 60 feet, and then you basically just walk it around, and then dispense the string accordingly.
I actually kind of like that idea. Because we already do this. I know for us, we have way too many of the chalk line strings. But like, if you just use that actually might be a good a good way to do this is you use those chalk line strings and you put little, I don't know, knots in it. And then you just, walk it out to those different little knots. Once you have those knots out there, then you can put whatever you want, a cone or whatever, and then you just walk it like you're talking about in a circle, Robert. Like that might be a very easy way to get this done in a very quick and efficient manner to use something like this. The other thing I was going to say, I think I probably heard this from Nick, but I was kind of thinking the same thing of what I've seen that kind of annoys me. And this is, I've been different places where, pitchers are out there shagging or whatever. You have guys, just a bunch of guys just shagging in the outfield. I actually get really annoyed when there's too many guys out there because it doesn't give good feedback to our hitters. When, Joe Schmo is standing out in right center field, guy pieces up a ball and somebody goes and runs it down. You're like, yeah, that was not a good hit. It's like, yeah, it was, but you didn't get the feedback and the satisfaction to know that ball that you hit was going to burn a guy who is playing in normal position. So I almost, to go off of something that Nick had come up or starts implementing with his guys, of guys who are not up, like they need to be a half kneel and just down. And I almost think like if you want to have guys out there, like, okay, the guy who's not up, he's doing a half kneel. And then when that guy goes and takes off for a ball, then the other guy pops up and then he's good to go. And then that other guy is, dead. And that I think would give a better look for our hitters to actually get better feedback as to whether or not, for whatever it was they're executing. Cause some of it's a question of like, okay, game winner, moving a guy over, is it deep enough for them to tag? All those sorts of things begin to play in to, did a guy actually execute what he was trying to do there based upon where the defense actually is and who's up, and where if you just have a bunch of guys just standing around randomly. And I think that's going to be something that's probably going to be hard to change from just a baseball culture standpoint, because it's just nobody's really paying attention to what the defensive guys are doing out there. And I think but I do think you could actually gain something by having only certain guys up at a time. Or just even too, like I get annoyed when some of our catchers or whatever will just go stand in the outfield. It's like, no, go stand somewhere in the infield where an infielder would be. I'd rather see guys standing on an infield or at an infield position so that guys can tell, hey, that line drive that he just hit, would that actually have been caught by a middle infielder? Was it right to a guy, or did it actually have the loft to get over a guy? Because sometimes I see some of that and I'm like, you know what? That was probably an out. But if I actually have a guy there, whether or not he's a true shortstop or not, and he hits it in the hole, and seeing a guy move over that direction, you get a sense of, man, he almost got that one, or he had zero shot at getting that one, and you hit it hard enough to punch it through the hole there. And two, even if you don't have enough guys and you only have one guy over here and you have two guys over here, man, it's almost like you have a shift going on, right? And this guy can kind of play wherever. And now all of a sudden you can play with this space over here. And so to me, this is where I think we can do a lot better when we have a field to helping guys begin to experience and learn how to hit to open space based upon where the defense is.
Yeah. I completely agree with you there, because again, there's just so much value. And again, it's that instant feedback, similar to how we use data, that instant feedback. There's that instant feedback of, man, was that a hit? But if, random pitcher out there catches the ball that's in right center, like, you don't really know if it was. But my minor thing was, like, with catchers, there almost needs to be like some exploration with them, because this has happened firsthand. We've had not one but two catchers, like, as part of batting practice, like, go stand in the outfield and like make reads. Both of them are spending time out in the outfield, because one would because with the way the GLVC works, is you play one game Friday, 2 games Saturday, 1 game Sunday. So basically, those catchers would just trade off. One would be in right, the other one would catch, and then so on and so forth. So I think there's still that opportunity for exploration, and then on the other end, there still needs to be that kind of structure. So like what you mentioned earlier, I think with the kneel down approach could be a really good way to combine both those elements. One, and then two, be able to give hitters that necessary feedback. Because again, something I found interesting was, when you mentioned launch angles earlier, I found that I looked at like a 10 to 20 degree launch angle, and then I looked at 75 to 85 exit velocity, and then 90 and above, and then that kind of 85 and 90. So 75 to 85 had a higher expected batting average at the MLB level than in that launch angle range than that 90 to 100. Why? Because of these circles you're showing, because they're hit hard enough that there's a fielder there. Whereas the ones that are hit a little bit softer but have that enough loft to go over the infielder's head are end up dropping for hits. But when you're in a practice setting and you have 3 or 4 guys playing short left field and they catch the ball, how do you know if that's truly a hit? And then you as a hitter have to adjust accordingly based upon
I do think, and not I would just be reiterating if I would just talk about the good point about like not having too many fielders out there. I do think one issue, I'm not going to go into it, but could be talked about at some point, is like I think big issue with people not being able to change this is because what do you do with the pitchers during this time, right? It's like I think that becomes like we're 2 hours into our practice, the last hour's BP. Like, well, okay, what are the pitchers doing? Like, of course you're just gonna throw them out there, right? I mean, as a pitcher, I wore the Shagger Swagger shirt like from routine baseball. Like I was all about it, but I was trying to make reads. Just being honest, I wasn't one of those pitchers standing around. Like I was trying to. I was once the center fielder took off, I was up in his spot trying to get the next one before he came back. But I think that's in the baseball community that needs to be talked about. Okay, so what now do? You already have you're 2 hours in with your pitchers. They're obviously not throwing anymore. They've already done their throwing. They've already maybe done their little bit of conditioning, whatever, and they're recovered. And now what? And that's a problem that probably needs some solving. Until then, I think you're going to continue to see pitchers just kind of sit around the outfield, like clog spaces because they're bored. They don't have very good attention spans for the most part, unfortunately. We can always work on that with a little mindfulness every day. But I think that's something that we could be talking about down the road. And then the last thing I'll say on this is when I was with AIC, we actually did this. I don't know exactly how it was set up because I wasn't involved. So I was doing stuff with the pitchers during BP the entire time. But it was actually a very intense tracking system, and our BP went through the roof. And I think we played some of the best we ever did. But they were tracking the defense the entire time and actually putting different defenses on, kind of what you're talking about. It's like you literally had to make so many plays. You had to turn so many double plays. You're putting them in different situations. Like you're acting like there's a runner on first in certain situations. There's times where the outfield may be going out. They may be playing in at different times. So it's actually like you're kind of moving around and exploring with them. But I don't think how it was tracked was perfected by the time we were done with the season because it was like you had to make so many catches in the outfield. You had to turn so many double plays. Even like a comebacker to the L screen, a pitcher had to fake like turn two. So there were some flaws to it, but I think it ramped up BP for both the hitter. But I think what happened too is like because we tracked so many, like we had to get so many like put outs from our shortstop, like guys intentionally started hitting the short because they're like, oh, we're going to be out here forever. So I started rolling over short. However, maybe there's some usefulness in that because now you're working barrel control. I don't know, but I think that helped a ton as far as like just as far as for the hitters initially and the fielders.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Robert.
There's that side of it too. Like when you mentioned pitchers, like we encourage pitchers to be athletic because what does that do in turn? Having that, shagger swagger, things like that. It allows them to be athletic in the field, which then in turn allows them to be athletic on the mound. So it increases athleticism and then allows them to, understand their movements a little bit better when they're out there, shagging or doing something of the like. So yeah, there is that really tough fine line, and it's not easy to be able to say, hey, but can we create environments where during that time can we use kind of the space that's outside of the field or something to allow pitchers to be athletic? That's again, that's another conversation for another time, but
Yeah.
that's still a really good point you bring up.
I'll avoid my rant on this because obviously I have plenty ideas on that, but I feel like that might be for a different topic.
I mean, that's fair. I guess there's one to go about the cage thing. I did, and I wish I had all the proper images. I might have it somewhere for I believe Riggins put out a really nice one to show how much of the field the cage takes up, right? It takes up such a small portion of the field that we need to be cognizant of.
I do
So
think that's interesting though. I don't think I ever thought about like if you were to just plop a cage like on home plate and stick it actually on the field, what it would actually look like.
here, I measured our cage. This is what it looks like on a field. Right? Like it's super small, like most balls that we were watching earlier, like they're kind of going in here. And if can't remember what I had this is the line. This where I think the first baseman kind of is if you hit this ball here, it's going to first. And then if you're standing here and you pull it, this is kind of going to third. And like, I mean, just look at how small of a window you have between foul and fair or to the third baseman, just if you're just talking angles right out of the box. Like that to me is the craziest thing when you're hitting in the cage. And I believe these white lines are where your middle infielders are. So if you hit it this way, this is where traditionally your second baseman's going to be playing. Oh, sorry. I didn't have the mouse in the right spot. So foul lines right here, where I think third baseman is from where home plate in theory is. And then your first baseman hitting it over here, hitting it to second base is that white one, and hitting it to shortstop is that other white one. And so depending upon too, like where your shortstop is playing, like if he's playing here and I hit kind of a weak ground ball back up the middle, that may be picked up by the shortstop and you get thrown out. Same thing even with this other one over here. So, I mean, that's where to me it's should we always be rewarding balls hit back to the back of the cage? I think it depends on how hard it was hit. Like if you hit a hard ground ball to the back of the cage, that's probably squeaking through. But if you hit a ground ball to like the middle part here, you're probably looking at ground balls to second base or to your middle infielders, these two white ones.
Right, because like in our case, like we were thankful to have flight scope, so it gave us somewhat of a field projection. It gave us a little bit better idea, but even then, in some cases, so like on the other side of the cage, so we had like a 2 cage setup to kind of filter in pitchers, rather quickly, so we wouldn't be there all day. But on that other cage, like yeah, you hit it right back to the back of the net. They're like, oh, barrel, that's an easy hit. Well, is it really? That's where kind of that feedback makes it really tough for you to be like, it might be. Or in the case of, is a ball fair or foul is another thing that you could talk about within that cage setting.
Yeah. So here, just to try to get it, make sure I was kind of, right. Like it's not perfectly on home plate, but it kind of gets you the idea of if he's if you're to hit it that direction in the cage. There we go. First. So you can kind of see like where I had those cones. Like it's crazy to me how close that is to the foul line. So if you put foul lines in your cage,
if you don't basically hit it right here, which is probably not going to stay fair, but you have this tiny little window to hit it through to try to keep it fair. But I do think though, if you hit it here, that's a hit. Like I think that's where it's like, how do we represent? If we go back to this one here, right? If you're able to hit through, man, that's where it's like hit through in this area, you have kind of a chance. This is where again, it's like trying to figure out these angles is to me really tough to try to visualize where those hits and where those holes and those gaps in the infield are for guys. And this is where I totally understand why someone like DBU just puts up launch angle strings and we're going to hit just rising line drives that clear the infield. Because if you do that in a general sense, like more often than not, those will turn into hits. But I mean, it's really hard to try to train a complete hitter inside. And quite honestly, DBU should be able to get outside. Why would they hit in a cage when you're in Texas? I don't know. I mean, I get it when it's like a bazillion degrees outside, but it ain't that in the spring.
I've heard it gets cold. I don't know. We'll wait and
I'm
see.
sure it does, but I mean, I'm gonna try this fall for as long as we can still get outside after fall ball ends and we get, our individual work. Like, I'm going outside.
Yeah.
Like, even if I'm cold, we're using that field for as long as we can because I know in the spring there's going to be snow on this sucker and we're not going to be able to use it till May. Let's try to get as much use out of it as possible. So it's beautiful in the fall, but man, playing in the north.
Spring on non-game days and practice days this year, I tallied it up. We had more indoor practice days during the spring than we did outdoor because of weather.
Yeah. I mean, it's just playing in the north. Like man, I mean, we were talking about we need to figure out how to turf our field. Like we would be able to get on it at least a little bit earlier.
But then it brings up a just beautiful like thought or point, like, okay, for these schools that are in climates where being outside is rather unfavorable, how can we get representation by being indoors?
And that's why I did this. Like, I have the percentages. I want to say this is like 20-ish degrees off center from center. I believe it's like 20, 25. I don't know. Like, it should be 45, right? So if this is a 90-degree angle, 45. I don't know. I'm not very good with math, but I remember like taking the numbers and they were about 20-ish degrees. I want to say 20 to 25 degrees from the center. And it's like 5 or something for something absurdly small for the corners. Yeah, 20 degrees, and I had basically 35. So if you start dead center and I go 35 degrees, yeah, that makes sense because it's a full 45 to this line. So if you basically 5 degrees from the foul line over is where your corners are. And if you go basically 30 degrees in from your foul lines is where your middles are. So yeah, it's kind of absurd how small these gaps are, where these fielders are. It just goes to show for younger players. Okay. I'm going to make that caveat for younger players because I understand why pro guys actually perform better when they hit in the cage before games and they don't go out and do the on-field stuff. But for younger guys that need the experience, it's so hard to replace hitting on a field. And I do think you can get away with hitting in a dome you're doing way better when you can get a big cage to hit in. So if you can hit in a big cage that's, if you can get basically 3 wide, a cage that's, gets you out to here on both of these, like that then makes this, you can visualize this way better and begin to see all this, because then you can start to get your foul lines in there more. And I've seen that. And I mean, if I could, I would try to hit in that setting as much as I possibly could. So, guys, got anything else? I feel like we've probably beat this topic into the ground.
I don't have anything else.
Oh, really? I mean, I'd say the last thing I would say to it is just like thinking like indoor practice. I mean, luckily in the situation I'm here, I don't really have to think about indoor practice anymore. But like, it's so hard to just make it representative in a cage. It's like near impossible. So to me, it's almost more of a losing game at times, like trying to go down that rabbit hole and finding ways. Since no matter what you do, like even if you say that, oh, that might have been down the line, like no, they may think it in their head, like after you say it, but like the feedback's not there, right?
Yeah.
You don't see the ball going in the corner, so it's almost. And I don't know if this is necessarily 100% true. If trying to make it representative and like hitting the exact holes and putting it where it needs to be, it has more value than just simply like giving them problems to solve.
Yeah.
Like finding different problems, even if it's not technically representative or the angles don't line up, that still may carry over since they're still searching for some form of information, right? And trying to solve the problem within a hopefully an arm and with the bat, right? So like that's, I don't know, that's just kind of where my brain went with it, because this looks really complicated and trying to figure out how to like get them to actually believe that okay, that this was, that wasn't, that, you know what I mean? Versus like, let's just be problem solvers, and then you can reward if you solve the problem we gave you and you're searching for that information, right?
I agree. And that's where I go back to, I think it's simpler to just put up launch angle strings,
Yeah.
because I do think having some sort of external focus and trying to, now with being indoors, you're going to just play the odds, and try to figure out, okay, how many different ways can you hit a ball with this launch angle? But I still think, at least to me, I would still want to at least keep these in. I think this is too hard, to your point. But if you have an understanding of where your middles are, that at least gives you context for this line drive that hit the cage right here is probably going to be a one hopper to your middle. Like, I don't think guys understand. We clap it up for guys. Oh, good line drive.
Yeah.
When it's super low on the side of the cage, and you're like, that's a ground ball. Like it for like an 8 foot, or I think that's kind of like, we have 8.5. No, I think it's taller than that. It's got to be taller than that. Maybe like 11 or 12 foot cages, right? Like you need to be hitting it kind of near the top of the cage if you're going into the sidewalls for it to not be a ground ball. If you're like in the middle of that cage, like it's not. The other thing too, I was going to say, I was joking with guys when we were doing on-field BP and balls were getting hit up in the air and guys were, they're just going to the outfielders. I would be like, hey, in the cage, that's a double, or, we'd say that was a home run. Because I mean, that's what because even too, you look at the exit velo is probably decent enough. And you're like, that ball's probably gone. Like, nope, right to the guy, when we're on the field. And that's where, for me, it's one of those things where, to your point before, the cage is just so hard to really try to help guys really understand, is this going to translate? But I think, like, again, to your point, doing all those different sort of, just giving them a bunch of different tasks and trying to get them to be as athletic, dexterous hitters is going to be the best way to probably see things translate to the field.
Yeah. Some form of information that they have to act upon, I think. At least we'll have somewhat.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I want to do is plug stuff for you guys a little bit more. So to wrap up, how can people find and support you guys if you have any things?
I know at least one of us or one of you guys does.
As far as social media?
Well, I mean, social media for sure, but also I know, Robert, you got a Patreon and you got your YouTube channel and, that sort of a thing. So I want to at least create a space for you to shout that stuff out.
All right, I will do, and I appreciate that, Garrett. We will. You can reach me at Robert Fry 40. That's ROBERTFREY 40 on Twitter, and then same thing for Patreon. Patreon.com/Robert Fry. And then my YouTube channel as well. Same thing. My name, just Robert Fry. That allows you to learn how to code in R with baseball data. And then the Patreon kind of just supports me continuing to create wonderful content. And then Twitter could be a vast things of not just YouTube, but maybe analyzing the game in a different way. So definitely, I appreciate any and all who follows and always open for a good conversation.
Baker, do you got anything? Where can people find you?
I'll just plug my social media, which is just at Coach G Baker on Twitter. And I just pretty much post whatever comes to my mind and whatever I'm thinking. So usually 100% baseball or Bible content. And then Instagram I'm not using quite as much anymore, but I'll probably start posting on that again. So it's the same thing at Coach G Baker. Those are my two accounts.
And then I'm super excited to let people know that you should check out Emergence's stuff. And if you want to get a little bit of a discount for their courses that they have, use the code Finding the Edge 7. And you can either spell that all out, no spaces, or you can just use the initials FTE 7 to get 7% off on all courses except for the Movement Academy. Highly recommend that you guys check out the Movement Academy intro, or the TMA intro course that Rich and Michael Zweifel just put out. It's really good 12-week course on just the basics of an ecological approach, and kind of comparing that between a traditional approach or an information processing approach. They cover a lot of the stuff that we try to cover here on this podcast, but in depth and all organized. So highly recommend that you guys go check that out and get 7% off on any purchase there. And it helps support this podcast as well. I'll put that out there. It does help me out. So if you want to use that code to learn more and improve your craft and become a more attuned, adaptable, dexterous coach, go over there at emergentmovement.com to find stuff out. I'll have all the stuff linked in the description for all these guys and all the stuff that they posted. And till next time.